Mondo Bathroom and Kitchen has never been prouder to partner with the Ottawa Food Bank. As a division of Boone Plumbing, Mondo has been part of the Ottawa Valley landscape for over 80 years. We owe everything to the people of Ottawa, and we feel that it's our corporate responsibility to give back to the community that helped build us. We are thrilled to be the presenting sponsor for Adopt a Crop and have really enjoyed getting our hands dirty at the Harvest Farm. This season's goal is to grow 130,000 pounds of fresh local produce that will go back into the community. And now, I'd like to introduce our cooking segment led by Chef Cassandra Pietropaolo of the Urban Element. Chef Cass will be sharing how to elevate this year's harvest at home in her recipe for a cucumber, melon, and halloumi salad. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Cassandra. I'm chef with the Urban Element. I was tasked with finding a recipe for you guys that would include some of the crops you're helping grow and a summary recipe that would be nice and refreshing. So when I took a look at the list of crops, I saw cucumber and watermelon, so I figured that would be perfect for a nice refreshing salad. We're gonna be adding in some seared halloumi, a bit of fresh herbs, and topping it with some toasted seeds for a little bit of crunch. So first we're gonna get going with marinating an onion. I like adding marinated onions to salads just to add a nice acidic, refreshing punch. So first off, we're gonna start with the pickling liquid. So what you need for that is a small pot, and we're gonna be pouring in a 1/4 cup of sugar, a 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar, a 1/4 cup of water, and a teaspoon of salt. So this is a very basic pickling liquid recipe. Super easy ratio to remember, just 1-1-1. And you can adapt this to any type of pickle. So you could be using jalapenos, white onions, shallots, red onions. If you wanted to pickle beans, the same kind of basic ratio would apply. So we're gonna put that on the stove and just bring it up to a boil. Once it comes up to a boil, we can stop it, let it cool down a little bit, and then we're gonna be pouring it over onion. So for the onion, we're gonna wanna peel it, but keep it whole. So to do that, I just cut off both ends of my onion. I like to give it a tiny bit of a slice just to help me peel. So I try to get through the first little bit of the peel, try to go through the first or the second layer of skin. And then just peel away, get off any kind of dry spots that are on that onion. And then we're gonna be cutting nice full slices. If it's easy for you to cut it in half and do half slices, that's okay, but I like to keep it whole if possible. That way it gives us some nice rings to put on our salad. I'm gonna try to go and do slices kind of as thin as I can. If you have a mandolin and wanted to use that, that'd be a great tool for use for kind of this cut. And then when it no longer feels safe to kind of use your onion, just stop there and you can put it aside and use it for a stock if you'd like. Or for any other application that kind of needs to be chopped up and placed in a sauce where the cut doesn't matter as much. And then I'm just gonna break up my onions a little bit, put them in a bowl that's gonna be okay with receiving some heat. So any type of metal bowl, glass container, little mason jar would do as well. And I'm just gonna set my end aside. My liquid has come up to a boil. I'm just gonna pour that over top. So the hot liquid is gonna help pickle our onion really fast. You could use the same liquid over again. So if you use all of your onions, you can definitely go ahead and reuse that pickling liquid on another batch of onions or even some different kind of vegetable. So once this is done, I'm just using the spoon to press everything down, make sure everything is covered. And then as it kind of gets absorbed and gets hot, the onions kind of soften a little bit, makes it easier to fit inside our bowl. So that can be set aside, and while our onions are pickling, we can move on to cutting all of the veggies we need for our salad. So we'll be using 2 types of melon today. I like to use a variety just to give us a difference in colors and even a bit of flavor and shapes and textures as well. So we're using watermelon and cantaloupe today. So we're gonna be using 2 different cuts. I like to alternate cuts whenever I'm working with salads, and that kind of offers us a prettier presentation. It makes it visually interesting and can turn something super simple into something a bit more elevated that you can have people over with. So for the 2 cups of salad, I'm using about 1/4 of each melon. It might yield a little bit more, but it's the easiest way to kind of work. Just cut those melons in half and use 1/4. I'm gonna be cutting my watermelon into cubes. So you're gonna see I'm gonna do this through the peel, and then as I cut my cubes, I'll just discard any piece that has a peel on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some nice thick slices. And then you can go ahead, discard the 2 ends, have them as a snack if you'd like. Any kind of recycled pieces, I like to keep in the fridge and use for a smoothie. And then from there, I'm gonna use about 2 to 3 slices at a time and cut strips across that are about the same size as those first slices we did. That's gonna give us a pretty even cube. And then once again, once you get to the pieces that have the rind, we can discard those. And then once we've went over, done our slices, done our strips, we can go ahead and cut everything one more time across to get ourselves some nice cubes. If there's a little bit of white, we can go ahead and keep that. If there's too much, once again, smoothie or snack with the rest. This is gonna give us a really nice, pretty salad. If you're not so much about perfection and doing this for kind of a nighttime dinner, then you can definitely go ahead and not be as perfectionist about the cuts and add in a bit more of the scrap so you're not wasting as much. And then we can put all of that in a nice big bowl. We're gonna be tossing all of our salad together so it can go in the same bowl right away. Cubes go in, setting that aside. And then I'm gonna move on to my honeydew. I'm gonna pull out an old gadget. If you have one at home, definitely go ahead and use it. Don't get to use it often, but it can be quite fun. I'm gonna pull out the melon baller for this one. One quick trick to getting the seeds out of your melon is to go ahead and use an ice cream scoop. So an ice cream scoop or any type of spoon is usually kind of the easiest way to really get those seeds out of your melon. And then to use my melon baller, if you guys are using this, I'll show you a quick trick. If not, you can go ahead and slice it and cube it the same way we did with the watermelon. So to get the nice roundest balls as possible, what you want to do is press first with the melon baller and then give it a twist. By pressing it in, you have as little flat piece to your little balls as possible. So I'm just going to go ahead, go all the way around my melon, and then I'm adding those balls to my salad bowl with the watermelon. Same thing, using this can create a little bit more waste, but you can always reuse your melon as a snack or even as a smoothie. You can do a little cold soup as well with all of your scraps. I'm gonna go in the middle and try to squeeze in 1 or 2 more pieces. Oops. Setting this aside. And then we're free to move on to our cucumbers. I'm gonna be adding a different variety of shapes with those cucumbers as well. I'm gonna be using 2 English cucumbers for this. I'm gonna be cutting one into strips. That way we'll be able to kind of bend them and curl them and add some nice kind of volume and height to our plate. The other one, I'm gonna be using a roll cut. I'm gonna start with that. I'm gonna trim the edge of my cucumber. And then for a roll cut, what you wanna do is hold your knife at a 45-degree angle and then cut down. So you're gonna have a nice kind of triangular piece of cucumber. After that, you're lifting your knife right up, keeping it at the exact same angle and rolling your cucumber about 90 degrees. and then you're gonna go ahead and cut back down. So we're keeping our knife at the same 45-degree angle and giving a quarter turn on our cucumber every time. So again, knife at 45 degrees and just a quarter turn on our cucumber. If you need, you can bring it back closer to you, lift it up, and then give it a twist again and keep going with that. Then once you get to the end, you can just snip off the edge and cut that piece in half if you want to have it be a little bit closer in size to the other ones. And this goes in with our watermelons. And then after that, we're good to move on to our strips. You can either go ahead and use a knife, or you can bust out a mandolin if you have one at home. You always just want to make sure that you're being super delicate with your fingers, watching out to make sure you don't cut yourself if you're using one of these. I'll do it both ways so you can see how it's done. If you're doing it by hand, I would suggest cutting off a tiny piece from the bottom. So I'm cutting off as little as I can, just enough to give me a nice flat surface to work on. That way my cucumber is not rolling all over the place while I try to slice it. And then I'm gonna go ahead, take my knife, put the tip of the knife down, and then pull towards me. By pulling in a nice slow motion like that, it's gonna be the easiest way to go kind of as thin as you can. And the thinner the piece, kind of the more flexible it'll be on our plate. If you're doing it by hand, just take your time and really run that knife slowly. And if you're using a mandolin, kind of adjust the bottom to get the thickness that you want. And then after that, if you have a guard, you can use your guard. If not, I suggest using the palm of your hand. So instead of using your fingers and having a chance of getting those caught in your blade, if you use the palm of your hand, curl your fingers up, have a nice flat surface to hold your cucumber down with, and keeping any kind of bits and pieces far away from that blade. You just want to run that as long as you feel safe. And then once you get to the end, same thing as the melon, kind of snack or smoothie works. I'm going to stop here, put that aside, and then these nice strips can go into our salad. So for the vegetables, we have one step left, and it's to get all of those herbs off the stem. We're going to be keeping all of the herbs full leaves today. I like to use herbs as kind of lettuce. I like to think of it as lettuce in my salads, especially in the summer when you're able to go just to the garden and kind of pick anything that's fresh. Today we're going to be using mint, chervil, which is, if it's new to any of you, it has a slight fennel anisey taste to it, but it's quite delicate. I like it for its pretty nice delicate leaves. And we'll be using a little bit of cilantro as well for a nice punch. So the only thing we need to do for this is use our fingers to kind of pinch the leaves off of the stem. Any big leaves I'm going to toss into my bowl with my vegetables for my salad. Any smaller leaves I'm going to set aside so I can use them as a garnish later on. So you want to go ahead and do that for the mint, the chervil, and the cilantro. If you're having issues getting any of these herbs, you can easily substitute to kind of anything that you have that's fresh. Basil or Thai basil would be really good in this case. For the tarragon, for the chervil, you could also substitute that for tarragon, which is a very similar herb, but will have a bit of a stronger taste. So just saving those smaller, nicer pieces of leaves for the garnish, and then anything that's bigger can get tossed in with the rest of our salad. If you come across any pieces of leaves that are kind of discolored or slightly gluey, make sure you discard those and only use the herbs that are nice and fresh. You want to keep your herbs longer in your fridge. There's two ways of keeping them really nice. First one is to wrap everything in a towel or in paper towel. That kind of helps keeps the humidity and keeps them alive. What you can do differently too is put everything up in some type of Tupperware or a bowl or a glass, and then cover that with a little plastic bag. That acts as kind of a small little greenhouse that will keep your herbs at kind of the perfect humidity and keep them nicer for longer in your fridge. So in this case, I've put about 1/4 of my herbs aside for the garnish, and I've used about three-quarters of it into my bowl with my veggies. I'm gonna compost any of the stems that I have left. And the base of our salad is done. We have our onions marinated, we have our melon, cucumbers, and herbs all ready to go. And then next up, we can move on to the dressing. So for the dressing, I'm going to be using a little bit of cumin and sumac. Cumin will give it a nice kind of rounded flavor. The sumac will add a nice little bit of acidity, and we'll also be using pomegranate molasses. So pomegranate molasses is made from the juice of pomegranates that has been reduced. It has a nice sweetness and a tanginess. That's why I like to add it in dressings. It kind of gives you a bit of that vinegary flavor and a bit of that sweetness. So it's really nice to kind of balance everything out. We're gonna be using about a tablespoon of this. I'm just gonna pour this in. You can find this at most Middle Eastern grocery stores, and there's usually quite a few different brands. So the best way to kind of look at it and find the best one is to read that ingredient label. Some of them will have thickeners or have kind of added syrups, but if you look at them, some are just straight up concentrated pomegranate juice and sometimes a little bit of sugar, and that's how you know you have a nice quality pomegranate molasses to use. And then to that, we're gonna add in about a teaspoon of the sumac. And these two ingredients are also gonna add a really nice color to that dressing. And just a 1/4 teaspoon of the cumin, just a little bit. And then I like to add my salt and pepper in at this stage as well. I find if you put your salt in at the beginning and are able to dilute it with some of that lemon juice, makes it easier to dissolve that salt before adding in the fatty content. I'm gonna go with a generous pinch of salt. The cucumbers and the watermelon are mostly water, so you need a good amount of seasoning to really bring out what a little bit of flavor is in those vegetables. And then next up, I'm gonna be using the zest and juice of a lime. If you don't have a zester at home, you can always use kind of the thinner side of a box grater. That'll do the trick. If not, you can always kind of peel the zest, which is a peeler, and give it a fine, fine chop. All those options works. If you're using the zester, just run your lime across the blade and trying to get as much of the green off, stopping when you see the whiter part of that lime. To make sure I'm twisting on all sides to really get as much of that flavor out. Especially when you're using a lime, you never know kind of how dry or how juicy it's gonna be on the inside. So if you use all of that zest, even if you don't have much juice, you have a nice punch of lime in your recipe. And then I like to just give it a quick roll. Helps break up some of the pulp and get some of the juice out. Cut it in half and squeeze it. If you have a fancy juicer, you can go ahead and use that. If not, I like to just use my fingers. Squeeze as much of the juice out as I can. So that's our base. We have our salt, our pepper, the sumac, pomegranate molasses, and cumin in there. And then we're gonna whisk that up together and then add in our olive oil. So we're gonna use about a 1/4 cup of olive oil. I like to add it in a steady, slow stream. If you're doing this with one hand with no one to help you, what you can do is put a kitchen towel underneath your bowl. That kind of stabilizes everything, and then you're free to slowly pour in your olive oil without having your bowl kind of moving all over the place. Tiny bit more. Then now's the perfect timing to give it a taste. See if you want a bit more salt and pepper. Tastes good to me. It's super tangy with the sumac, but remember that whenever you're making a dressing, you always want it to be a bit more punchy and flavorful, because once you dress all those salad items, you're gonna lose a bit of that flavor. So you really wanna make sure that you have a nice strong dressing. And then salt and pepper, we can always adjust once we're tasting that salad. You can make sure that you're tasting it and adjusting any levels of kind of salt and pepper before you put it on your plate and serve it to whoever you're serving it to. Next up, we're gonna go ahead with our halloumi croutons. We're gonna cut our halloumi in about 8 pieces. I like to cut it in the shape of a crouton, kind of mimics a crouton while kind of pleasing anyone out there who's kind of gluten-free. We're not putting any bread in this, but the crouton will add a nice little bit of crunch and squeakiness. Recipe calls for 125 grams. That's usually about half a block. The bigger the piece of halloumi, the easier it's going to be to sear. But at the same time, we want small enough pieces to be able to serve and eat quite nicely with everything else. 2, 4, 6, 8. We're going to keep them like this. If you have a halloumi that's quite wet, all different brands of halloumi will have kind of a different humidity content. So if you see that it has quite a bit of water, all you want to do is take a piece of paper towel or even just a regular kitchen towel, and then you want to pat it down. Make sure you're taking out any extra moisture. That moisture is kind of what's going to pop at you and be a bit can be a bit dangerous while searing it. So I like to take it out. I'm going to save ourselves a bit of the headache. And then once our halloumi is cut, we can get rid of our cutting board, get rid of our knife. And we only have a few steps left until our salad is ready. We're gonna be searing the halloumi in a nice hot pan, and then we're gonna be mixing our salad with our dressing and then plating everything up nice and pretty. So the trick to a nicely seared halloumi that doesn't stick or melt in your pan is a really hot pan. You don't need much oil. If you have a pan that's hot enough, it's gonna sear and get nice and golden brown right away and not stick. So what you wanna watch out for is really the temperature of that pan. So I'm gonna be turning it on to a medium-high heat. That's usually a good temperature for searing. But then as you're cooking, feel free to adjust it. If you see that it's getting brown super fast, you can take it down a notch. If it's not getting golden brown, then you can definitely turn it up. All of our stoves can be a little bit difficult or a bit different. So really go ahead with what you see as a result in your pan and use your judgment to either put the heat up or down. But to preheat it, I like to use kind of medium-high heat, make sure that it gets nice and hot. If you're using a non-stick or a cast iron pan, I usually don't put any oil in it. The fattiness of the cheese will do the trick and sear on its own. If you're using a pan that you know stuff sticks a lot to in general, you can go ahead and put a light layer of oil in the bottom of your pan. To tell if it's hot or not, I like to kind of hover my hand over top. If I can get my hand nice and close to the pan, usually not hot enough. If I have to hover a bit higher, then I know I'm getting closer and closer to having the right temperature. And the other thing you can do is just go ahead and test your pan with a tiny piece of your cheese. So what I do is I go ahead and just tip. There we go. I tip my cheese in. If I hear that sizzle, if I see a bit of smoke, a bit of bubbles, I know I'm good to go. So I can hear the sizzle. I'm turning down just a notch, and then I'm going to go in and put in all of my cubes of cheese. And then to get maximum flavor, maximum kind of color, we're gonna be searing it on all 6 sides. You can feel free to use a spatula if it's easier. You can use tongs. And then I always kind of remember in which order I've put my pieces down, and I'll go ahead and check the first one. See, it didn't take, when you have a nice hot pan, doesn't take long, doesn't stick. Once you have that nice color, you can go ahead and give it a quick turn. And we're gonna keep doing that until all 6 sides are seared. Then in general, anything you put at the center of the pan will get hotter faster. Anything on the edge can take a little bit longer to cook. Giving them one more flip. Really building up that nice crispiness. And then always giving a look at that first piece you put in, making sure that it's nice and golden, and then giving it one more flip. If you have a sensitive smoke detector, definitely turn on your hood vent for this. And once all 4 main sides are done, I like to flip it over and do both ends of my cubes as well. And then once they're done, I like to grab myself a little plate or a tray with some clean paper towel. That way, if there's any kind of extra fat, it'll drain on here and it won't go inside your salad. If you're ever having a lot of people at home and don't want to be stressing out doing this last minute, you can definitely go ahead, sear it all, make it nice and crispy, place it on a tray, and then when you're ready to serve, you can pop them into the oven for at 300 for about 5 to 7 minutes, and they'll get nice and warm again without having you stand over top of the stove while your people are at home. Once all sides are seared, they go into my clean plate. And then we're ready to toss our salad, plate it up, and serve. So I always like to serve my food family style. I always find it kind of more fun and inviting when everyone can kind of grab from the plate and pick and choose. So that's why I've taken out one nice large platter to plate my salad on. And keep that off to the side for now. I'm gonna take my salad, add all of the dressing in. I'm just pouring that over top. And then when it comes to salad, I find using your hands is really the easiest way to get in there, make sure everything is nicely coated. And then once everything's coated in the dressing, if you want to give it a taste, you can give it a taste. If not, onto the platter it goes. And whenever I'm plating salad, I like to use the tip of my fingers and always be kind of nice and delicate. And if you're putting down everything kind of bit by bit and slowly, you're able to slightly build volume and make sure that everything is looking good. Those cucumber strips can just lay over top like this, or if you want to, if they're thin enough, you can always give them a roll and set them down. And you don't have to be too finicky about it. We have a bunch of different shapes, a bunch of different color. It'll kind of do the work on its own. Make sure you're getting all of those herbs in there as well. So once our base salad is on the plate, we can move on to our pickled onions. depending on the size onion you have, you may have had a little bit too much. If you don't want to use them all, they'll keep in the fridge for up to a month in the pickling liquid. You can just go ahead, take those nice big circles and kind of gather them all the way around the plate. They should have softened in that liquid as well, so you can give them a little bit of a bend. You can see I'm not quite using all of them. And then my favorite part is up next. That nice, warm, crunchy, salty, delicious cheese is gonna go on. Kind of the same manner we did with the onions. Just put them here and there. And I always like to make sure that I'm cleaning the edge of my plate, which keeps everything nice and pretty. So any kind of dressing that would have fallen off, we can wipe that. And then we can go ahead with our final 2 garnishes. All of the herbs that we kept aside can go in. So I'm just gonna sprinkle them on top, let them fall where they want to. And then last but not least is those nice toasted seeds that we're gonna be using as a garnish. If you have no nut allergy, you can go ahead and put almonds, put walnuts, anything you kind of like that's crispy. But today, to keep this recipe kind of low on allergies, we're using a mix of pumpkin seeds, black and white sesame seeds, and a bit of sunflower seeds. I've toasted all of that quickly in the oven just to give them a bit of roastedness. And then this same thing, just a nice general sprinkle on top. It's gonna add a nice punch of a little bit of crunchiness. And that's it. Your salad is done. And I hope you enjoy the class and enjoy your meal after this.